physical and sexual abuse and probably be killed and so on. And so he and his son agreed to do that and to not fight this. But Clive Bundy's son, Ammon, they decided to go to this refuge and kind of take over it. I mean, nobody was there, but to take over that and to protest this. The problem in my book is Ammon Bundy had no standing. It was bad. It was a bad idea to do so. We all agree, I think most everybody that knows what the situation agrees that the government was abusing these people, and they were wrong. But there wasn't a concrete case in convert. It's like he didn't have standing in court, and he was told by many people you need to stand down. If it was you they were doing it to, that would be different. We could support you. But you're out here doing it when the two people that you're trying to stand up for have said, no, we're not going to fight this. We're going to go ahead and go to jail. And it ultimately came down to a bad thing. The government did, it looks like, kill, what's his name?
Lavoy Finnecum.
Lavoy Finnecum, yeah. Lavoy Finnecum was a good man, father of 11 children, and just a good man. Right to keep and bear arms is to cover military-grade weapons. Today we would call those assault weapons.
But not
semi-automatic.
tanks.
Pardon me?
Not tanks and...
Not probably tanks. No, they just said military. The idea is that Americans, the militia here, could be armed and could be something that could stand up against the people. Say, well, how can you stand up against the government? They got nuclear weapons. Well, you don't ever get away from conventional war, either during war or after, for cleanup and for control and so on. And so 10 million armed people in Wisconsin, and no telling how many guns there are here in Texas and around the country and so on. The people that want control in this world and know we got to get rid of the U.S. Constitution. We got to get rid of national sovereignty. We have to get rid of the U.S. We got to get rid of the Second Amendment, and that's going to be an interesting. Bob?
This is a really interesting discussion because I don't know that we have a weapon of any sort that one doesn't have ancestry as a military weapon. Everything we got has spun off from our military.
Well, it is true, but when they said military-grade weapons, they said that, I should have finished that, military-grade weapons that the average soldier would have in battle. And so the average soldier today would have an M1 or M4 or M16 or AR.
They don't define an assault weapon as it was originally defined. They've mutated that.
When you say they, you mean the people that are against assault weapons now? Yeah.
As it was originally defined, it was a shoulder-mounted single operator of selective fire and a mid-range round. It was a smaller round, and the gun could be selected full automatic or single fire. And they don't want anything that looks black and goofy inside is an assault weapon.
In our day, all of those things would fit under, in my book, would fit under what the Founding Fathers said were military-grade weapons the average soldier might have in battle and so on. And they're protected under the Second Amendment. It is that, but to listen to it out there, the battles, there's never, I started watching this 40, 45, I was working in the U.S. Senate in 1975, and I remember looking at that time, there was 30 or 40 bills. None of them got to the floor, maybe one. But at any given time, there's 30, 40 bills in the House and the Senate, maybe, that were in one way or the other trying to restrict weapons or to register guns or to register or to put numbers on bullets and register reloading and in one way or the other infringing, chilling the right to keep and bear arms. It's a sacred right. It is a sacred right. You can't have it. I like what the NRA said. It's the Second Amendment, but it's the first freedom. If you don't have the Second Amendment, then you can't protect all of your other freedoms. And it's our God-given right. Who was it that said no man is free that doesn't have a gun or doesn't have the right to have a gun is not free? Someone who said that? I usually know who the quotes are from, and I can't remember. All right, Second Amendment. Let's go on to the Third Amendment. The Third Amendment was, most people, a lot of times I used to skip over the Third Amendment. The Third Amendment says no quartering of soldiers in the houses. Well, we don't have quartering of soldiers right now, but we do have some other things that happened while that was happening. Back then, the king would just, the soldiers would show up. They would give you a self-written, what do they call them, writs of assistance. and they would write it out. They would authorize themselves to come into your house and say, we need a place to stay and hot meal, and we're going to stay here for a couple of weeks, and we'll take what we want, and so on. And it was a real burden, and they hated that. But these writs of assistance were these self-written warrants to come in that warranted them coming into your house. Well, now fast forward to the Fourth Amendment here, and the Fourth Amendment, and I just wrote out the Fourth Amendment, I think, on your back side of there, because I didn't know how to do the right of the people. This is all about our right to privacy. Our founding fathers said that we have the right to be free from government intrusion on our privacy, unless they have some kind of indication, and they spelled it out here. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures by the government shall not be violated, and no warrants, which would violate that, shall be issued, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So for them to violate our right to privacy in our homes, for example, or in our trunks or other private places where you would expect privacy, they have to have someone go before a neutral judge, a magistrate, with some kind of evidence, and it's got to be it says under oath or affirmation. In other words, someone's got to give their testimony and what the probable cause is that a crime has been committed or may be committed, and they've got to be specific. They can't just say we're going to search your whole house and so on. That's the right to a warrant. Well, so let me just tell you a quick story here. Remember the writs of assistance? Now we've come 360 degrees now. Under the Patriot Act, you don't know about this because it can't be publicized, at least by the individuals where they get abused. Under the Patriot Act, FBI agents, for example, can come to your house with what we call self-written search warrants. They just write them out. They don't go to a judge, and they don't have somebody giving an affidavit or an oath before a judge and with some kind of problem. It's just self-written search warrants allowing them to search in your home. And so I need to show you this clip from Judge Napolitano. A few years ago, I think in 2007, I want to say it was, two FBI agents showed up at the library where there was an 86-year-old librarian and she had a 76-year-old assistant with one of these self-written search warrants. And the 86-year-old librarian said, "Who the heck are you and what the heck is this?" and handed it to her 76-year-old assistant. But the law says, the Patriot Act says, that you cannot tell another living person that these self-written search warrants have been issued. You can't tell your wife in your bedroom. You can't tell your priest in the confessional. You can't tell your lawyer. You can't tell a judge under oath in a courtroom that you have done this. And so this 86-year-old librarian was arrested by the government and charged with violation of the Patriot Act because she had dared show to her 76-year-old another person that she had received this self-written search warrant. They went to trial, and the government must not have done their judge shopping very well, because this judge, a courageous federal judge, said to the government attorneys, they said, "Do you really think that the Constitution allows you to have this right?" And he was going to find the law unconstitutional. At least it looked like that. And so the government withdrew the case. If the case is withdrawn, it's not before the judge cannot rule on it, and he couldn't find the Patriot Act, in this case, unconstitutional. So what I'm telling you is that today we have those writs of assistance, which those soldiers quartering themselves in their houses here over 200 years ago, we now have those writs of assistance in the form of self-written search warrants that are being used when the FBI and other federal law enforcement people, Homeland Security, are enforcing. Yes?
What year was the Patriot Act?
The Patriot Act was in 2001 because it was just 2 or 3 days after 9/11, and it had been around for over 10 years, but it didn't get any traction. Under the Clinton administration, they brought it out. They didn't bring it out real fast because they had them all vote on it without even seeing the law. Yes.
The Patriot Act was passed under Bush in 2001 and well after Clinton.
That's right. I'm saying that it had been written back, it had been written up back in the Clinton years or so, but it never got any traction. It never went anywhere in Congress. It was brought up immediately when 9/11 happened. And the government said, we've got to have this. We need to have these rights. You've got to give up a little bit of your freedoms here to so that the government can fight terrorism and so on. And they got them to vote on it without ever looking at this 300 and some odd page bill. They got a short executive summary that they could read, but it didn't tell them any of the bad stuff, that was in it, and it was written by the government attorneys. Yes.
So why are they arguing about the companies, the cell phone companies, that they have no right to, track phone numbers or listen to your private calls so this is part
You would
of
think it'd be a huge deal. I mean, Nixon lost his presidency. He resigned because he looked like he was going to be impeached and convicted because he just wiretapped one little office, the Democratic National Committee office. And now, since the 60s, we've been wiretapping with the old Echelon and the PRISM system and so on. And now with Edward Snowden, he revealed and did it in a way that there was no denying it, got it out to thousands of people, and it's all the feathers in the wind, and showing that our government is listening in on everything. If all of our cell phones are turned off, they have what we used to call a V-chip in them. They broadcast, but they can capture every stroke on the computer. And I'm not saying the government's listening in on billions of conversations, but if you say words like president, assassination, guns, explosions, conspiracy, then the supercomputers are filtering that down until someone starts listening. Yes.
I have a friend who's in the FBI, and our conversations have stopped. He won't reply to anything.
He knows everything,
He knows what's going on.
Maybe those get picked up faster because if he's talking about things he shouldn't be talked about.
That's
Well,
exactly right.
the advancement of technology has made it not only where governments, but there's a system called S7 on cell phone communication, which I saw on a piece last night on television, where some hackers who've been hired for security purposes for private companies, if they know your phone number, they can listen to any conversation that you have. They can look through cameras. So it's not just a government thing anymore. It's just a growing technology that's going to make us all careful about what we say and do,
It ought
because
to.
anybody can be watching at any time.
But my concern, at least here, is that we're trying to control the government. It's the government we're worried about. I mean, we ought to be worried about each other also. But the government, they got guns and badges and uniforms and prisons and so on. We don't want to. They have a lot of power. The Patriot Act, by the way, was passed, I think, 98-2 or 98-1 in the Senate. What's his name? Weinstein or something from was the only senator that voted against it, and he just said what everybody should have said: I'm not going to vote for something that you won't allow me to read, and I don't know what's in it. And then there was a handful, maybe 3 or 4 or 5, Ron Paul and a couple or 3 others, that would not vote, but everybody else just signed a blank check. They just signed, they just signed on to it, and we have the Patriot Act.
But they've had several chances afterwards to repeal it, and they've kept it.
Well, it had a sunset clause in it from
Yeah.
the very beginning. And every time you have a sunset clause in an important law, it's because if there's something bad in the law and they want to be able to say, hey, but there's a sunset clause that automatically expires after 1 year or 3 years. But as Judge Napolitano would say to you, any major time that we ever give away freedoms, they never come back. And so they're always re-upped. After the 1 year or 3 years, then it was extended for another 1, 2
But
years
they
or
had a
whatever.
chance to
They
read it by
extended
then.
again. When they had a chance to do it, they always extended it. The government said, we need this to continue to fight terrorism. And then the last time, which was just several years ago, they just made a permanent extension. So there won't be any more discussion about it unless, or at least the government, as far as they're concerned, it's a permanent law now. Quartering, so the bottom line is that the Fourth Amendment says that the government can't, we have the right to privacy. So where do we have the right to privacy? We have privacy, and we have an expectation of privacy in our homes. That's our castle. If they come in our car, you have the expectation of privacy in your glove compartment because they can't see that, or in your trunk. You do not have the expectation of privacy. I have a son. He's a doctor and a psychiatrist now, but 15, 20 years ago, he was going to community college, and he And he got stopped, and the police, and there was an alligator clip, a roach clip on his deal. And he said, "What is that?" And he said, "Dad tells me I always tell the truth." He says, "Well, it's a roach clip. What do you do with it?" "I smoke marijuana." I didn't know he smoked marijuana. And so it turned out to be a good thing. He turned his life around. But anyway, so the guys get out, and they spread eagle, and they arrest him, and they got in his trunk and everything else looking for it. By that time, they had the right to get in his trunk, because maybe there's some paraphernalia in the trunk, right? But generally speaking, you have the right to privacy in your home, but you don't have the right to privacy in your trash cans. You've put it in the public trash can, it's going to the dump. If they can get it out there, it's fair game. You don't have the right to privacy in Walmart or at a public park. You have the right to privacy. You don't have the right to privacy as far as your fingerprints are concerned. If they get on something, you don't have the right to privacy on the color of your eyes. They can see that, but you don't have to give them your DNA or unless they have a.
Now, does that have to do
Follow the
with
Fourth
seizure
Amendment.
of property, like when they arrested this guy?
It's the same thing for search or seizure.
It's the same thing.
It's the same thing. So whether they're going to seize your property or search your house, the criteria is the same. It's the Fourth Amendment. There has to be someone to show probable cause by oath or affirmation before a neutral magistrate, and then they've got to show where to look and so on. Milton. Okay.
Game wardens in the state of Texas, apparently the Fourth Amendment doesn't apply to them.
Nope.
No.
Because they can come into your home without a warrant, without even having to write a warrant, saying that we're coming in. They can kick your door down, come into your home, search your property, seize your property, and they are.
Well, we all know the good old boy system is alive and well, and has been for many decades. You know, and right here in Smith County, you know, it's not just Beaufort County, or it's the reason that movies like Walking Tall are great revenge movies.
So did they do it to you?
No, but I know people who they have done it.
And they were looking for
what?
poached game or something?
That would probably be their motive for doing it, but they can do it. They can
That's their
come to my
cause.
door and say that I think you have an illegal alligator skin or whatever, crocodile, whatever the thing might be. They can kick my door down, come in my home, and I have no legal recourse. None. Period.
You can't tell them to go get a judge?
No. They don't need a judge.
Yeah, because you can get rid of the evidence.
They don't,
They should get a warrant first.
they
That
don't
comes
have
under
to.
the tobacco firearms or something, doesn't it? Because
Yeah, and
that
it's
would sound
probably beyond my pay grade and above the level of this course and so on, but yes, it is more complicated. And okay, let's go to the Fifth and Sixth Amendments. There's some really good stuff in the Fifth and Sixth Amendment. No, all right. The Fifth Amendment says you got to have a grand jury required for serious crimes. You don't even get charged with a crime like murder or something like that unless there's a guy through the hassle of charging and spending the money of the taxpayers and so on. No double jeopardy. You can't be tried for the same crime twice. You ever see the movie? Yes, Bob?
I really questioned that. I retired from the military 40 years ago, and that was in 21 years. In the last few years, the Navy, at least, has had a wholesale house cleaning of commanding officers. And now they're talking about moving some admirals in general within the herd. But
Very political now.
yeah, they just lost these guys largely for alcohol and basic misbehavior. But as an example of the commanding officer of one of the squadrons that would be out in Washington, who had been to a house party over, probably at the officers club, and he lived in Anacortes, which is about a 20-mile drive. He comes into Anacortes all by himself at 2 o'clock in the morning. There's not a thing moving on the street. But he apparently was going slow and weaving a little bit. Cop pulled him over, gave him a ticket. He went to court, paid his ticket, and when that information filtered back to the command, he was court-martialed, and he lost his command.
He got tried in court, and he got that, and then he got tried again and punished again.
Yeah.
If you saw the movie Double Jeopardy with Ashley Judd, her husband frames her, fakes his death. She goes to jail for 7 or 10 years, pays her debt to society. He's still alive and he's living somewhere else. So